It's time to welcome our second very special guest for this evening, a composer of more than 80 film scores, winner of 3 Oscars, 3 Golden Globes, 4 Grammys, and he's also composed opera and even a theme for the Wanamaker organ in Philadelphia. This is a man of versatile musical talent. Please welcome Howard Shore. Yank those down so people can hear what you have to say. Mr. Shore, it's a great privilege to have you here with us tonight. Thank you so much. And it's very special, too, that you're here. This is Oscar weekend, so there's film music, a buzz in the air, not only from Nicola's new album, but from just the whole atmosphere of the situation. The film score for Eastern Promises is the source of the music that we're going to hear Nicola play in a moment. It's a dark film, with some unusual sounds in it. In fact, I'm happy to say that some of those unusual sounds we'll hear in this performance tonight. When you begin a film score, do you watch the movie, you read the script, you see rushes, a mostly edited film, you talk to the director? Any and all of those? None of those?
I tend to do things with the words first, very important. And so I always start with the original author, if the work is adapted. And Eastern Promises was an original screenplay, so I always begin with that. And then I tend to write a lot of music just based on the ideas of the story. And then I do a counterpoint of that composition into the scoring of the film, and it's pretty strict. I just do a straight counterpoint into the scoring of the film, and then I do an orchestration of that, which is really you're asking the question, what's going to play this piece, this counterpoint, which I've created. So it's a very linear process to doing it. All the different parts of it happen for me, in very strict order. I have to compose before I orchestrate, and then I conduct, and then there's the performance. So it's a very linear thing.
Let me ask you one question. I've already asked you 2 questions. I'm going to ask you probably a couple more. But the one I want to ask you next is, Leonard Bernstein only did 1 score for On the Waterfront, and he said he hated it because he hated having to write 7.5 seconds of tension in music. Writing to time, is that the last part of the process for you, and is that at all annoying? To cut out bars 23 to 26, we'll knock 4 seconds out of it, that'll take care of it.
Well, it's a different part of the discipline, really. That's why I was saying what I do is I write to the story. I write to the heart of the story and try to capture that as any composer would if you were trying to bring that story to life, bring the audience to that story. So that's a really strict discipline. That doesn't have anything to do with the imagery of the film. It's just, how do you feel about those characters and those scenes? I mean, what is the story saying to you? And so once you've done that work, and if you've done that work well, you've created all the motifs, all the themes for the piece. It could be a 10 or 20-minute piece. In the case of larger work, sometimes it's 45, 60-minute composition, pure composition. So you have that luxury of really writing from your heart what the story really means to you. You also have the great luxury of working with great artists like Nicola and great orchestras all over the world that are that you can write for to do your recording. And then you set that task into the more critical part of what part of this larger work that you've created, where does that go in the film? And that's actually can be an interesting part of it as well, because you're kind of, when you're writing the other piece, you're kind of dreaming about the imagery, you're just thinking about the story. It's a very sort of semi-conscious, because you want to get into the subtext of the story. Music does that. And so now you're trying to decide, when you dreamt about that and you created that music, sometimes I have to scratch my head, okay, I wrote that. Where does that go in the story? Where does that belong? And then what you start to figure that out, and then that can be a kind of a fun part as well, because you're just figuring out how the piece, what's the arc of the story, and how this composition works from beginning to end. And then there's and then actually in the recording is where you're more into the detail of the timing and, the actual performance of it. And then you're into more technical thing. You're into recording studio microphones, and, it's a different process.
Right. But all part of the discipline.
Yeah.
And so vital and often unnoticed, but well, what a contribution you've made to all our lives, the music that we see in the movies that we love.
Thank you, sir.
Nicola Benedetti, this piece that you're going to play is it's a concertino, Tatiana, from the score for Eastern Promises. When did you come across this thing?
When the film was being put together. I did the original soundtrack, which was an experience for me. I mean, it was an entire process that I had never been exposed to before. So to be in the studio for those few days and witness the immense attention to detail and the time taken over such a level of scrutiny. I mean, really over the tiny split seconds. I'd never imagined something like that, and it was an absolutely fascinating experience. I learned so much from, and obviously such an honor to be asked to do it. So that's I heard the music before anybody else did.
That piece was written for Nicola. It was 5 years ago. It was written for Nicola and members of the London Philharmonic
The piece that we're about to hear.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a larger piece. I mean, it's maybe about a 50-minute piece in total. And it was a larger orchestra. It was about maybe a medium-sized orchestra. And it had some of the folk instruments that I used, of which you'll hear one tonight.
Was that larger piece, was that built on your larger piece that you sort of created when you were thinking about the score for Eastern Promises, or was
Yes.
it a reduction of something later?
It's a reduction, yes.
Because
film, it essentially is reduction. Editing is reduction. Think of shooting all that film and then editing it in to what you see in the film, and how much is not, So part of the process in creating the score is that as well. It's creating a larger piece and then finding the kernel of it, the essence of it. And all the recordings were done live with Nicola playing and with the orchestra. And
all right.
yeah.
Well, this is exciting then. We're going to hear Tatiana, the concertino from Eastern Promises. Film composer Howard Shore, thank you so much for being with us on WQXR.
My pleasure.
This is
Thanks
just
so
great.
much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.